In this lesson, we'll take a look at working with the underlying structure of our objects, the components. So let's go ahead and start from a blank scene, and let's bring in a cube. Let's go over to the channel box. We'll hit this polycube input, select that, and let's select all three of these channels, subdivisions, width, height, and depth, and let's middle mouse drag those until it says 3 or 4 in here. We'll hit F on our keyboard to bring that up full screen and frame on it. So we looked at how we could select this object as a whole. So we can select the cube, we could sort of rotate it around, we can move it. What if we want to change the shape of it? In order to do that, we need to access the underlying structure of the cube, in this case, the components. So polygon objects have 3 different kinds of components. They have the points in space that make up all the intersections of these lines, so very apparent on the corners of the cube, but also here where we've got these lines or these points coming in along the sides. Those are basically just coordinates in 3D space, x, y, and z coordinates. They don't have any mass or any size or anything like that. Those points are all connected by edges, so you can see those would be represented by these green lines between all of those different points. Now, those edges form to make the visible part of the polygon object the actual faces or the polygons themselves. It could be called polygons or faces. The minimum size or the minimum number of edges that can create a face is 3. So a triangle would be the minimum. Otherwise, if you have 2 edges, you're not really have anything to see. So a triangle would be the base. A lot of times we'll work with square polygons or quads. So triangles and then quads. Quads are really good because they subdivide very predictably. A lot of times they're used for animation or sculpting. That's a quad there. And then also, if you have a polygon face that has anything over 4 sides, that's going to be called an n-gon, where n is any number over 4. Now, to be able to access our different components, there are a few things that we can do. We need to go into component mode. And so right now we're in object mode. To go to component mode, we can click on this little button right up here, select by component type. You can see now the green lines turn into these blue lines, and then the points become visible. You can see also with the selection tool active, if I hover over these points, you can see I'm getting sort of pre-selection highlighting going on there. We'll go back to object mode. If I want to select a particular component, I can right-click, and I can say, okay, I want to select the edges. So that right-clicking brings up this marking menu, and I can just move my mouse, still holding down on the right mouse button, go to Edges, and now I can select particular edges just by clicking on them. I can also use the marquee to drag across just as we would when we're selecting objects. If I don't want to select edges, I'd rather select faces. I can go to Faces and select Faces. You can Shift Select to add to your selection of components anytime that you want. You can also toggle between object mode and component mode by using F8 on your keyboard. That will allow you to toggle in and out of that as well. Now, when we go to our components, we can transform them with the same tools that we use to transform our object. So we could hit now W to move those points around. We could go to face mode and move those faces around. We could even rotate those. Now, with our point selection, really can't do anything as far as rotating or scaling a particular point. But if we had a group of points, we could scale those. And so you can not only transform your base object, but if you're in component mode, you can now manipulate the components. Now, the NURBS surfaces found under surfaces here, or create NURBS primitives, those are going to have slightly different components. So if we drop in a NURBS sphere here, we'll go to component mode in the same way, but the components themselves are going to be slightly different. So if I right click, I can choose isoparm, which allows me to select basically a curve anywhere across the surface. So I could click on one of these existing ones, or I can click and drag anywhere along the surface, going in both directions. I can also select a control vertex, which don't lie on the surface, but those are the kind of the analogous to the vertices on the polygon. So I could click and pull this out, and I can change the shape of the NURBS object that way. I can't do that with the isoparms. In order to move an entire edge, I would have to select the points, or I could go to Hull, and I could select a hole, and it's basically just a collection of those points, and I can move it that way. So NURBS components can be accessed in the same way, but they're going to be slightly different than the polygon components. So whereas here we would have a vertex, an edge, and a face or polygon, here we would have a control vertex, an isoparm which we wouldn't manipulate, we would use to construct the NURBS, but we wouldn't transform it, and a hole which we would transform. Now we also have the ability to do some selection in our modeling toolkit. A lot of this functionality has been merged into the modeling tools here in Maya 2015, but we also have the ability to, say if I go here and go to our selection, I can also come in here and use the modeling toolkit selection capabilities, and I could use the pick marquee, or I could come in and drag across here to select things that way. Okay, but for the most part, you can just use the basic selection. Okay, let me check that back. All right, and we can also come in here and let me go back to object mode here. Some functionality here in the modeling toolkit. So we'll go to multi-component, which will allow us to select any component, pick marquee, and we'll go to move, and then we'll choose tweak/marquee. And I can come in here and actually tweak these different objects. So instead of selecting and moving them, I can do it all in one action. So clicking and dragging lets me select whatever's underneath my mouse and allows me to modify those. Okay. Now as I come in here, you can see that with the lazy selection, I don't have to get right up against it. I can actually do it from the edges. So if we're working with something on kind of the silhouette of it, I don't have to actually get right on top of it. It'll allow me to get close and modify it that way. All right, so the next thing that we want to take a look at is the attribute editor. So we'll take a look at what's kind of located in the attribute editor, some of the information that we can get about our objects before we talk about kind of grouping and parenting, getting into the working with the hotbox, and also doing some simple scripting. So we'll take a look at that next.